So I know what a lot of you guys are probably saying right about now. Hey, Bane Shakes Charlie, I know you're always doing like big, in-depth, highly well-edited, gorgeous, hilarious, perfect gaming videos, but what if instead of doing all of that, you just did another one of those sassy reviews where you keep reviewing a bunch of toys and you're being so sassy about it that people can't tell how sincere you're being? What if you did that instead of your good content? Well, viewer who is thinking that exact thought, I know who you are. You're in good luck. It's your lucky day, motherfucker. So today I'm gonna just be reviewing 4 of the McFarlane 7-inch DC Multiverse line. I could not fit them all on the screen. In fact, with the size of my light box, I'm probably just gonna be struggling a lot to make them fit in the first place, because they're really tall and I don't have a large box. But you know what? I don't really care. You see, this is what I mean. They're just so tall. This is the best I can do. He pushed it to the very back, and this is as much as I can get without just getting the ugly sides of the light box in. I need bigger equipment. So the last time I talked about stuff, I actually took some pot shots at the Platinum Edition figures where they've just done a repaint and slipped them into retail releases, even though it was technically not relevant to that video in the slightest. And so in this case, I was at Target and I happened to see one. So, you know what? I personally benefit. Therefore, my mind changes. I officially love the Platinum Edition figures as of now. This is, of course, the Riddler. It's going for a comics look. Now, this is one I don't have the normal one that this is a recolored repaint of. From my understanding, the differences are this is a little bit more of like a darker maybe olive-y green, whereas that one's a lighter color green. It also has a different question mark and a whole bunch of them, and I think those are probably black. And also this one has some painted eyes, whereas the other one, I think, just gives it some blank white lenses, since they're going for slightly different eras of comics with the two. I don't know, don't quote me on it. I did not do any research. This is supposed to be easy. Now, this one in particular is going to be a very accessory-rich figure, as you can see. We get tons of alternate hands. That rarely happens. It's the same for the other one. That's all I know about it. Don't ask me any more questions. Here on the back we have just the version of the Riddler that the other figure is going off of. Since it's the Platinum Edition, they didn't bother to make any additional box or anything, so the card and the box art are both going to be just a little inaccurate for what this one is, but I do not really care that much. On the side, they're also telling you about the DC app for, I'm assuming it's DC Universe Infinite Read. Oh, look, it says it right there. DC Universe Infinite. I'm a dumbass. For reading the comics. It's honestly a good service if you want to read, like, all of the back catalog of DC stuff. They have a ton on there. If only they would add the last issues from the Dial H for Hero from years and years back that they don't freaking have. But that has nothing to do with the Riddler. Alright, and here is Platinum Edition The Riddler unboxed. Don't worry, I'm sure I cut the footage of me using absolutely unsafe knife techniques to get the little plastic tabs off, because these figures use too much fucking plastic. Anyway, as all of the McFarlane DC Multiverse figures do, he comes with a stand to stand upon, which is good because their feet are a little bit wacky and don't typically go down very flat. Not that it matters when they're as stable as this one appears to be. He also comes with a collectible card, like they always do. Again, this one matches up to the other figure a little bit more, though this one also appears to have some eyes in the mask, which I don't think the normal one does. Again, I didn't look it up. Also, the hairline is way too thinning, so I'm starting to think this wasn't good art to pick for the other one either. Oh well, can't complain, I have this one. On the back, there's a brief little blurb. Let's see if there's anything I spot, any problems. And it just appears to be the New 52 Scott Snyder version of the character. Not that that's the end of the world, but it is weird that they never update these to match the correct version. Oh well, no major issues other than that. Now his main accessory, of course, is his Riddler cane, which, if you noticed, back before I took him out of the box, they actually had it going the wrong way on the box. They had it, like, facing this way, but I don't know if you can, you know, use your eyes, but question marks go this way. And I'll nail that down into his current hand. Aha, like so, and he shows it off. So here's the front view of the figure like this, and the back view like this, before we move on to the rest of the accessories, because this Riddler comes with a gob-smacking 8 hands total. Most figures, we are lucky that we just have the first 2 hands in the first place, and he gets 3 alternate pairs. I'm really glad I'm doing him first, because if I tried filming this when I was exhausted from the others, there's no way in hell I would show all of these. So the first alternate hand just lets him hold the Riddler cane, just like the hand that was default on there. Honestly, this is probably going to be the one that he's using the most, since holding the cane in his right hand is sort of what I go for in the other figures. And then this is the other hand that came default out of the package, and it sort of has a partner hand here if you want some big theatrical hands, wide open, doing some sort of gestures. Then we've got some dynamic hands, a pointing finger and a thumbs up, so he can look charming AF. And finally some fists, so he can fist the Batman. Wait, shit, I said it wrong. These are probably going to be the ones that I have on him the least, because I feel like the others are all far more in character, so if I were personally going to leave some out, I would leave those out, but again, why am I going to complain about all these extra hands? Our figures never get these. Jesus Christ, I wish my parents loved me as much as Todd McFarlane loves this figure's hands. So all in all, he is a very good looking figure, very sharp. Some people are actually probably going to like the other one more since it has a lot more question marks, though this one with this slightly darker green and the shades of purple, and especially the eyes on there, he just looks really nice. I do notice there's just a little bit... Oh, actually came right off. I thought there was a paint failure on his nose, but turns out it was just a speck. So you know what? I take it back. I can't bitch about a thing anymore. 10 out of 10. Absolutely love him. Alright, up next we've got the Classic Comics Supergirl. Now if you notice up here, it is a McFarlane Gold label. All that means is that this is a retailer exclusive of some sort. They literally call anything that, so long as it has store exclusivity. In this case, it is Target's exclusivity. Now, this one, they also have a Platinum Edition version of this, where it's darker blue and darker red so that it looks like the CW version of the character. Even has the CW version of the crest where there's not a backing. It's blue behind the S. Unfortunately, despite really wanting it because it looks sharp, they did not have this one. Having no further personal benefit, I am no longer friends with the Platinum Edition figures. On the back, we have a very nice piece of art. This is relatively modern looking art. I'm not sure if this is from a comic specifically or if they just made it for the figure. I'm going to highlight down here that you can see some natural leg skin color, calling that out with the figure momentarily. This one is labeling it as the DC Rebirth version of Supergirl, so that makes sense. That's why we're looking at some relatively modern art. And here is the DC Rebirth Supergirl out of the box. As you can probably see if you're paying attention, I've got her on a flight stand that she came with. Interestingly, she came with both that and also a normal stand, which is interesting because the flight stand also comes with a normal peg for standing. I'm not going to complain though because I have a couple of figures that don't have these due to being Build-A-Figures. This is probably going to go in with the Dark Knight Rises version of Bane since he doesn't have one being a Build-A-Figure. Regardless, Supergirl herself, to take her off for you to look for a minute. Supergirl herself doesn't come with any accessories or extra hands. At least in this case, her hands match. Sometimes they give two relatively different hands, and sometimes, and even more peculiarly, they give characters just the hand that is shaped to hold guns by default, which is really weird. I've got a Dr. Fate who, despite being magical, has one of those hands, but since he has unique molding on the back of his hand, he just permanently has a gun hand, even though he doesn't need a gun because he's magical. But that's not the point. We're looking at Supergirl right now. Her face itself is pretty decent. Sometimes their faces can get a little bit wild, and though she gets perhaps just a little bit too undefined on her eye colors there, she's borderline. It's actually not bad out of the box. I really am fine with the whole thing. Hair sometimes bothers me. The Injustice 2 Supergirl hair is always why I wouldn't pick her up, but this one I think does a sufficient enough job. Now, another point of notice, like I mentioned with the box, is that her legs are all pure red. I'm pretty sure this was just a cost-saving measure. In fact, there's another cost-saving measure I'm going to talk about in just a second. But this is a shame because typically this costume for Supergirl, she's got either just see-through tights, so it's skin color, or just her skin itself above the boots. So either way, that just feels really cheap. I wish they had done that. That wouldn't have cost that much more. The other thing is the cloth cape. Some people really like these. I'm not too sold on them myself. On the one hand, you technically can pose a little bit more. Not really this one, because you have to have wiring inside to do real poses with it. The real reason I'm not a fan of these and typically prefer molded looks when they're on display, though, is because the inside of this type of cape is just way too porous looking. I don't love it from this side. It's not as bad on the outside, but on the inside, it just really shows. If you're familiar with Lego, the spongier cloth capes that Lego will sometimes do sort of has this same material, and honestly, I'm not a fan of it either way. It's clearly just to make the figure as cheap as possible. I think they wanted to save a little money on the retailer exclusive because they knew people would buy it being a retailer exclusive. Either way, though, I do quite like how this one looks. I can tolerate the cloth cape on this one. It's not the end of the world. Would have preferred a molded cape and would have preferred legs to be, colored correctly, but it's not the worst thing that's ever happened. I'll just have her hovering here while we look at the card that she comes with. Here she is, same art as I mentioned on the back of the box. Again, legs don't match up, and technically the S also doesn't match up, which is why I was thinking it was classic instead of rebirth. Here you can see the shape of the card is different, or the shape of the S is different on the card than the classic Superman S. I think that's okay. I prefer that. Interestingly, though, the line work going around, it is on there. I'm not sure if the S was a classic S in some of the Rebirth stuff and just not here. Artists sometimes vary. Let's look at the back and see if it matches up. Yeah, it appears to be fine. It's her classic story that was very much the case when Rebirth rolled around. No complaints. For our last two, we're actually going back to some figures from a couple of years back for Zack Snyder's Justice League, or as these branded it, Justice League 2021. I'm a big fan of the Snyder Cut. While I'm not the biggest Snyder bro in the world, I do think Snyder's DC trilogy actually does hold some merit for people who like what it's going for. So don't at me if you don't like it. I don't care. I've heard your arguments. I'm not trying to piss in your oatmeal. Stop trying to piss in my oatmeal. I actually did a whole series of videos the week the Snyder Cut came out, just looking at different characters and different games and movies, and just had a fun time. Honestly, I'll drop those links in the description if you want to see some of my older but still quality content. Regardless, this is obviously Ben Affleck Batman wearing his tactical armor from the climax of the Snyder Cut, technically also of the original theatrical cut of Justice League. He was wearing that one there too, except there he was just sort of trying to effing kill himself and make the other heroes hang back. Dear God, I do not like the theatrical cut in hindsight. Box is a little bit beaten up. This is not one I was lucky enough to find in the wild. I obviously had to just order this, but that's okay. Again, I don't keep the boxes. You can see the other characters. We have Batman, Black Suit, Superman, Flash, Cyborg, Batman again instead of showing Wonder Woman down here. Don't know what happened there. And Aquaman. Again, why did they show... I've already bought this one. Why did they show it again down here? Here we have the Justice League Batman from the Snyder Cut. Now, technically, this guy had a couple of variations. There was one where the goggles were up on his head, and then there was one where it was actually an unmasked version of the head. I believe the rest of the figure was all the same. And now, years later, there's technically a third variation where if you get the collection that McFarlane sells where it's one of each of the live-action Batmen, it actually has a cloth cape instead of a molded cape, and then there's no goggles on the cowl at all, is my understanding. I, however, am not paying that much for all of those figures. I'd rather pay relatively cheaper amounts for just a few figures. And again, I prefer the molded capes. In this case, I think that's a big difference because the thick, coarse material that he uses in the movie is replicated very well here with all of this. Now, technically, it's not as posable. It's permanently like this, so some people would prefer a wired cape. But, again, I still think it looks better when you have it on display than a cloth cape. Of course, he comes with a card. Card is just the same promo art from the Snyder Cut, and a description on the back that actually does technically match up with the movie, rather than just the generic comic backstory. They actually have it matching the movie. He also just comes with a single batarang, as it looks in the film, which you can just stick in his hand. Batarangs are pretty straightforward with McFarlane. The big thing about this one, there's certain elements that really make me like a figure. When they're shiny, alright, I'm sold. It's shiny, it has me in. This one honestly looks really good, really detailed. A lot of texture in here on the crotch and in the inner thighs, since I'm going to be a pervert about it. It really looks the part. The one weird thing I do want to highlight here, the base itself actually appears to have a printing error. It looks almost like there was maybe another base, or there was something in the way when the machine was doing the printing, so the DC logo's all messed up. It's kind of charming in a dumbass way. Now, last and genuinely the most interesting story of the bunch, we have the Justice League 2021... Oh, hey, look, it's how he appeared in Shazam. The Justice League 2021 Superman, but it's not just any of them, because the normal one was the black suit with the silver crest like he wore in the Snyder Cut. This is actually a recolored Target exclusive that, for the life of me, I cannot fathom how lucky a few of us were here. So you see, this one, you might even notice up here there's no gold label. This was early on enough that McFarlane hadn't really done all the normal things, so there's no gold label, there's no platinum, nothing. There's no labeling that this one is an exclusive. So at the time, I wasn't aware this figure existed. Years later, for the longest time, these things went for exorbitant prices up above retail, way above retail. Never the kind of thing I thought I could justify throwing down. These things were fucking expensive. Then, out of the blue, a few weeks back, scrolling Reddit at sort of a funky time, not too late in the day, but late enough that I don't think everyone and their mother's on, I see a post on the McFarlane subreddit where someone's like, hey, out of the blue, 2 years after no one's had these anymore, Target's restocked these online. So I immediately hop on, and I get one, and it's just the retail price. It's not $100, it's nothing stupid, it's $20. And I get one, and they run out again shortly thereafter. So a small handful of us randomly found the opportunity to get this one when we thought we were never going to get this one. mind-boggling. What I think most of us have come to a consensus on is that someone in a Target warehouse somewhere found like a pallet of these or something that had just gone unaccounted for. It's actually a very common thing in the retail world that people just aren't keeping good track of things. In fact, most of stores' losses come from just not keeping good inventories. And keep an eye on this. Here's your anti-capitalist tip for the day, because you know how many anti-capitalists love getting on branded action figure reviews. But anytime that stores are like, oh, we have to close the store, or oh, we have to lay people off because of the, thieving problems, they're lying. Theft takes up less than 1% of all stores' losses. 99% of stores' loss, where they just didn't sell something they weren't supposed to have, is from their own damn inefficiencies. In this case, though, it benefited a few of us, because we get the movie version of Superman with the colors in his costume. Technically, it's closest to how he appeared in Batman vs. Superman. He did have the colored version of the costume in the theatrical cut, but it was oversaturated because they did weird stuff with the lighting. So this is pretty much the Batman vs. Superman. But it's the Justice League 2021 molding, so it gets to go along with all the rest on the back. Yet again, we have a case where they have the figure's art, which they've made black and white here. I'll talk about that. And then they have just the normal one down there. Technically different figures here, just weird that they did it and left Wonder Woman out. Again. So here we have the relatively underappreciated Henry Cavill Superman. Here's his card. This is so interesting. As I was talking about, this one's in black and white. The normal version of the figure, which is the black suit, actually has more color than the color version of the figure, which is black and white. Now, I've figured out what's going on pretty quickly here. My guess is they didn't have promo art of the colored version, and it was a much faster process for the free card that goes in to switch it to grayscale than to try and recolorize it. It's not the end of the world, of course. Zack Snyder famously also did a Justice is Gray version where it's the Snyder Cut, but it's in black and white because he likes it. Because he's Zack Snyder, he's a bit of a goofball. Let him do his thing. He seems relatively friendly and kind. On the back, we also have a bit of the description, and again, it matches up to the movie. Interestingly, though, there's a little bit more gray here than the other one, too. Fascinating stuff. But here is the figure. I'll take him off the stand for a second. He is absolutely beautifully detailed. The molding in on everything just matches the same texture that he's got in the movies. I do wish there was just a little bit of printing in here because it's a lighter color, at least on the BVS suit here and there. It's not the end of the world, though, because it's molded in and it looks great. The gold bits are shiny. The red crest is very shiny. You even get the subtle middle line that Batman vs. Superman and the Justice League suit has. Man of Steel technically lacked that. These are different in Man of Steel, is why this one doesn't represent that. Of course, we have a molded cape. This one, it's not my favorite molded cape in the world. His cape is massive and billowing in the films, so in order to account for that, they've folded it a whole bunch, which technically I'm sure there's some shots where it's like this when he's just standing around. Not the best in the world, but again, I still prefer it over that cloth one just because it gives it a little bit more character. That cloth is just going to lack without wires inside. The face itself is really good. They're not always good at likenesses, but I really like this one. One thing I'm going to take a closer look at using the zoom on my camera on, there are several people that have noticed, I don't know if it was from this wave or just the figure in general, some neck paint problems, especially on this side. I appear to be free of it. It's not impossible. I'm going to be careful with him to make sure nothing comes of it. But I don't think I've got a neck
problem like some people have had. I'm not sure if the older waves, when this was available, had the same problem, or if there were some storage issues with some of these in this most recent little batch that people found, but I have lucked out. Now, as I mentioned before, he is completely identical to the black suited Superman, at least as far as the mold goes. This was just purely a recolor. So we've got some cases where the hands are actually a little bit different. He's got one that's sort of up and open for flying and I guess smacking people, and then he's got the other one in a fist. So this is one of those cases where technically it would have been nice to have a little bit more, maybe one pair of hands where they're both open and one where they're both closed, but as nice as this figure is, it's hardly a deal breaker. Now, I actually have the other one that is black and silver. That was another one that I technically missed back when it was out. I didn't collect these nearly as avidly. In fact, other than the Action Comics 1000 Superman, I didn't have any McFarlane figures until the Suicide Squad wave, so I could get King Shark. So I missed a lot early on, these included. But this one that I'm about to put on screen was more readily available because it was available in more stores. And so when I was at a geeky action figure used games shop near my sister's house, I actually saw one for what was practically still retail price. I think there was maybe maybe it was even as high as $5 above retail, but either way, it was well within the range I was willing to pay. And so, again, putting him with the flying hand up just so you can see the two together. And we have Superman and Superman. And honestly, they complement each other quite nicely. You see them and you can see certain details more in the silver, and then other details more pop nicely in the color. The textures look great on both. The faces look great on both. It really looks the part for Henry Cavill. I absolutely cannot wait to have these guys on display together. All in all, I am just so delighted. This is one of the holy grail finds for me. About the only other thing that would even come close to matching the hype I had when I discovered this one is when people find Arkham Origins Deathstroke just standing on a shelf somewhere that they get for cheap. That would be probably number 2, but this one was the holy grail one that I was so sad that I was just never going to have because he was never for the right price. And here I am now. So dope. And there you have it, 4 McFarlane DC Multiverse figures of various different eras, all opened up for your viewing enjoyment. Yes, I know last time I opened like 20-some of these and reviewed like 20-some of these. I can only rarely afford to make that sort of financial shenanigan happen. If you did enjoy this video, I would greatly appreciate it if you would like, if you would leave a comment, some of your thoughts on the figures. Maybe go back and watch some of my previous videos. I don't do toy reviews all the time because I don't want people getting frustrated at my channel getting overly cluttered with these things, but I really like to do them despite what my sass might imply. So if you enjoy these, check out, I've got a bunch of other of those. If you want to see some gaming content, I work my ass off on that stuff. I really put in a lot of extra hard work and attention when I'm playing that stuff. So please check out some of that. My main series here is a briefish history of Assassin's Creed. The next episode of that is currently undergoing process. It's a big one since those always are, so it may be a little bit before it's out, but I'm prioritizing it as much as I can. It will be a briefish history of Assassin's Creed Syndicate. However, if you're watching this one, you might like the DC stuff more, so I've also started up a briefish history of Batman Arkham, which I release episodes of that in between every few Assassin's Creed. I've only done 2 at this point, up until, obviously, Arkham City, but I'll be covering the 3rd one once I get through Syndicate's episode. Again, I thank you all for watching. Please feel free to check out some of my other stuff, and most crucially of all, I have the real nice Superman and you don't, so get cucked, motherfucker.